Hey there, audio friends. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're looking at a little desktop DAC amp. This is the Fosi SK02, and Fosi Audio sent this out for me for free to review. They're not asking for anything besides my honest opinion, so that's what you're gonna get, as always. You know, it's a nice... I like it. It's a nice little DAC amp, right? We'll dig into why. I would kind of think of this, like when I got it, this is like the Mica Origin G3, right? Like I had the Mica Origin G2 for a while, and I got that one just because I thought it was a nice little desktop form factor, and this kind of is very, very similar. I would say they took a lot of design cues from the Mica Origin G2. So let's dig into what all this thing has going on for it, some specs, and of course we'll talk about how it sounds and ultimately whether I think it's a halfway decent product. Okay, so just as we're starting off looking at the device, you know, you've got a multifunction button knob on the top here, and I think one question that should be going through your mind is, what would you go with something like this over something like a dongle DAC, or would you go up to something like the JDS Atom stack, right? So you've got kind of these different tier levels of potential desktop use situations, and you got to find out where you land on that. Okay, so could you get by with something like a dongle DAC? Well, a lot of people probably could, as long as you don't have big headphones to drive, and as long as you're not looking for like a dedicated volume control and stuff like that. When I'm at my desk, tend to prefer to have some sort of like a volume control knob that I can quickly adjust. So this guy fits the bill. It also, right, it's got like this multi-function button here, so you can set this up where, you know, pause, double tap to skip songs, etc., etc. So it's an infinite scroll wheel, right? The feel is reasonably okay for what you're getting here. I think this is, when it comes out, I'm not sure if it's out quite yet, but it's going to be around $100 for this device, so that's the other thing to kind of keep in mind here. Now, you've got some different outputs on it. You've got your regular 3.5, and then you've got 4.4 balanced on here, and they do have different power going to each of them, so we'll look at that here in just a second. As far as inputs, you've got USB in, and that's also power, and that's USB-C. You've got an auxiliary out that is also an optical out if you've got the adapter, and then you've got optical in. So you do have a few different options on this for inputs, outputs, which I think is pretty nice, right? So you could run like a 3.5 to RCA into some powered monitors or something like that. You could even run, you know, optical out from this into some powered monitors if you had that type of a use case going on. So it definitely could control all that stuff, and you've got a little button here to do all that, and then you've got little LED indicators here to help you out with that along the way, right? On the other side, you got high-low gain, and then so you got these are all little different lights here, where you've got PCM on one side, and it's going to show you their bit rate, and then the other side is DSD, and then it's got like a couple other little indicators on there for inputs, outputs, things like that. So that's pretty much the unit here. I would say it feels well built. It's a nice little footprint. Let me see if I can unplug this Atom over here for you. So here's the Atom amp, so you can just see how all that compares. So it's a pretty nice little, you know, it's compact, but obviously much bigger than a dongle, okay? So when we start looking at what's the difference between these three? So thinking about the power of all this, well, you've got, you know, obviously you've got a big amp here, not a big amp, but, you know, a normal desktop DAC amp size here with the Atom. You do have to have the DAC separately, so this is going to be about twice the money. You really get a similar amount of power, so both of these guys are about 1 watt of power, which would make you maybe lean a little bit more towards this, but we'll talk about that when we get into sound a little bit more as far as implementation goes. Now these two guys, right, this thing only has about 180 milliwatts of power into 32 ohms out of the balanced 4.4, where again this guy goes up to a watt. However, these guys are using the same DAC chip, which is the ESS 9038 2QM or Q2M or something like that, right? So these guys are using the same DAC in them, which is interesting. But potential to drive larger headphones, this should be about on par with something like the Atom. Now, when it came to sound quality, I was going back and forth between all of these, right? Trying to kind of formulate my thoughts on the value proposition for each one. I mean, this little guy can sound pretty good. And I would actually say like these two are very similar in quality of sound coming out of them. Similar levels of resolution and spatial information and things like that. Like I would say these guys are actually pretty similar. Obviously this one's still gonna be able to drive bigger, larger, more power demanding headphones, but as far as just the quality coming out, I think it's pretty similar. When listening to something like the Aria Organic, I definitely noticed a step up in quality when going to something like the JDS Labs Atom. Like it felt a little more refined, it felt a little more spatial information. So even though they're similar in power output, I still, obviously there's more going on in here. So there's something to that, right, is what I would say. This guy will be getting its full review here before too long. So where does that put you with these guys? Well, you know, I honestly thought the Fosi has a little more relaxed sound. This guy's a little more exacting and precise. I felt like this was a little bit looser, a little more mellow as far as its sound presentation goes, but very, very similar, right? Very, very similar quality of sound between these two. So I really think it comes down to if the Fosi SK02 is gonna work for you is really, do you need that extra bit of power over a dongle? Do you want the physical volume knob to play with? Do you want the option to be able to control other things besides just headphones, right? Do you want to be able to control some active speakers on your desk or something else with this guy? Then, you know, you're probably looking at the Fosi, and I think it's priced right for $100. Like I think it's a decent value for that. I mean, the upside to this guy, which also cost almost $100, is just how portable it is, right? But it's less powerful and you don't get the volume knob and you can't control like an additional device or things like that. So it really comes down to a use case thing. I think for me, if you're spending a lot of time on your desk, having something like this is a much more pleasant interaction. I think there is a solid argument though to be made for saving another $100 and getting a dedicated DAC and amp stack like the Atom. I think that's certainly something that some people should consider if your budget will allow it. But if you want something that's clean, tight, portable, gives you a volume knob, gives you the ability to control those other things, I think the Fosi will work just fine for you. I mean, and in general, I continue to be pretty impressed with Fosi's devices and the value that they offer. None of them are terrible, that's for sure. They always kind of like slot into the place where they're good enough and they kind of fit these specific niches. So thanks Fosi for sending it out. I appreciate you guys letting me try it. And I will also have a Fosi ZA3 review coming out before too long because they sent me one of those as well too. So as I delve a little bit further into speakers, we'll do some more speaker amps as well. Questions, comments, alternative opinions, drop all that stuff down below. As always, I appreciate your time. Thanks for tuning in, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.